Hey guys, this is Denny.
This is James from TeaDB, and so today, episode number 72. It's getting older and older by the week.
I know, it's good.
And so today we have a raw pu'erh, so we're kind of going back to that stuff. And this one's from a company called Tea Classico, based over in Israel, which is not the first place I would think of for a tea company.
Definitely not.
And but according to them, it's partially because it's good to store raw pu'erh there. So interesting enough, and it makes some sense.
Cool. So this is this is a dry stored raw pu'erh. It's 10 years old.
Older than that. It's from the 90s. It is the Red Star tool, so it was pretty heavily compressed, but you could see I broke up some of those chunks just so we can get a little bit of a stronger brew just right off the bat.
Yeah, absolutely. Around 5.5, 6 grams of dry leaf, and James is totally right. It's really compressed. The complexion of the dry leaf is very dark, so it looks like it's been properly aged. It's kind of homogenized in terms of the color of all the leaf material.
Yep.
And looking forward to trying this myself, yeah.
And so one thing to keep into mind when drinking this tea is that this is Hong Kong dry storage. And so Hong Kong is a very hot and humid place. So Hong Kong dry storage might be wetter than most other dry storages, at least.
Right. So James, as typically we would, James has a few big chunks and then just a bunch of kind of the particulate that gets knocked up when you're picking through the cake and so forth. So gonna go and do the normal stuff. How big is this one here?
This Yixing is about 90 milliliters or so. So pretty standard size for me. A lot of my Yixing is about 90 to 100.
Cool.
And so, yeah, the leaf to water ratio is a little bit light, but we're kind of using up the rest of this sample. Yeah, so.
Totally.
And we'll give this a couple rinses. So what you can kind of expect for these pu'erhs that have a little bit more age is that they will, I'll take a sniff.
Yeah, definitely.
Is that they will kind of tell you more about the storage for the first couple of steeps, and then as you continue to steeple it out, more of that original essence of the tea comes out. So the raw pu'erh that has some age has a reputation of being able to steep out for quite some time. And part of the reason is because it's distributed out through a number of steeps.
Really lovely aroma, very fruity, smoky, and then kind of typical. I'm looking forward to tasting this. Looks great.
Yeah, some of that deep earth that we can expect.
So how'd you get in touch with these folks?
They actually got in touch with me. We were, as some of you might know, TeaDB, we've been focusing a lot on pu'erh-related content. And so Neil, who is the proprietor over at Tea Classico, said, hey, I see what you guys are doing. Can I send you some samples for you guys to take a look at? And so this company has actually been been doing the rounds, so to speak, around the blogs and getting some positive reviews here and there from some of the pu'erh bloggers. So I'm very curious to check this tea out.
Yeah, absolutely. The saturation of the liquid is evolving, getting a nice orange amber color.
Yep.
And I'm looking forward to drinking this. Had some kind of stranger weather. It was just Labor Day weekend, this past weekend, so we're kind of in that in-between zone. We have a long summer here in Seattle. So, I'm curious about, excuse me, James, about you. With this kind of change in weather, what does it impact your tea drinking at all?
Yeah, I think for me, and I think for a lot of people, usually when the weather turns a little bit nastier and stuff like that, start leaning more towards the aged pu'erhs or the ripe pu'erhs, or roasted oolongs and that sort of thing, as opposed to more summery months where like the white teas that we drank a couple episodes ago, or the green teas might be more seasonally appropriate.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, it seems like those bolder cups suit themselves better for colder months. Bolder cups in colder months.
There you go.
Could be a thing.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would be.
All right.
But enough about rambling on. Let's drink some tea. Cheers.
Cheers.
Still definitely light. This is the first steeping. Really, really smooth, really balanced.
Yep. A really nice plum flavor, I would say, coming out of it. Like there's definitely a distinct fruit coming out of it, and it definitely doesn't feel wet as like some of the nastier Pu'erhs. It doesn't or as Denny, who drinks a lot of ripe Pu'erh, it doesn't have a ton of those ripe Pu'erh notes,
right?
As much as some of these other aged Pu'erhs we've had.
Zero sourness. Plum definitely. And to be fair, the forefront of the taste is that sort of earthy, smoky, minerally Pu'erh taste, and then evolving through that is that sort of plum richness, sweetness. Some more of this. Let me see. Quite nice, quite smooth. I'm excited to have the next steepings. I feel like this is light, not quite pulling the body of the tea quite yet.
Yeah, and we can see the color is starting to deepen. And one thing we can do to just extend that, because like I said, we're using a little bit less leaf than we normally do. Mm-hmm. So that's probably responsible for it. So as a response, I should probably add a little bit of steep time. I think that would probably serve this tea well. I'm going to declog this guy.
Yep. And the saturation of the liquid, the color-wise, has just blossomed to a deeper red. Really lovely.
Yep. I want to take a smell?
Absolutely. I get a really surprisingly sweet nose off of this. I'm interested in seeing how it goes for kind of those third and fourth steepings.
Yeah, and kind of some herbal notes too, almost.
Yeah.
Like some, yeah, it's quite interesting.
Much sweeter, and more fruit. I get kind of a sweet pitted fruit. Unlike a ripe Pu'erh where characteristic kind of cherry. This is more plum, maybe peaches,
stone fruits.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree. Yeah. And I think this is a good example of a pretty well balanced raw Pu'erh. It's got a lot of it doesn't have that super deep, like wetter storage smell that we had from like the from when we did that wet and dry storage comparison. That had much more of those ripe Pu'erh taste to it, like the sweet vanilla-y, very smooth. This still definitely has some youth in it, which is kind of interesting, especially for a Pu'erh of this age. So that kind of tells you that if this is indeed 20 years old, that it was aged pretty darn well to kind of keep some of that youth still in it. So it could probably benefit from actually further aging.
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly, getting sort of minerally salty notes out of this as well. This is gonna. So I thought of soap. And not in a bad way, but there's kind of a limestoney taste to it if you've ever actually licked a limestone before. Anyway, really enjoying it though, and in terms of the body, totally has evolved. So a much rounder overall, longer taste.
In this last steep, I actually extended the steep time to about 15 seconds or so. So we might be able to see even more of that just come out in this tea.
And I think another testament to the quality of this tea is that there really hasn't been that mouth-puckering astringency.
No, not at all.
Potential bitterness that can happen from oversteeping a young Pu'erh.
It's interesting because a lot of my aged tea experience has actually not really come from Pu'erh. Just because the older Pu'erh is from like the 70s or the 60s or the 80s, just expensive, just plain expensive. So I've drank a lot more aged oolongs We can buy them in small batches, and this actually kind of reminds me of them. In the sense that it's got that sort of really nice plum taste, at least the drier stored versions of aged oolongs, and I find it to be very pleasant.
Yeah, me too. This feels like a very solid, smooth, characteristic raw pu'erh. So I would place this sort of in the middle of the spectrum of potential flavors coming from a raw pu'erh, in a good way. I think it's just solid, classical flavors. Really nice.
And when would you be able to drink this?
I think this stands on its own really well. I have a hard time imagining this being paired with much. So my impression is that this would be delicious by itself earlier in the day. I'm already feeling the energy coming off of the tea for sure. It's very warming, very enlivening. So yeah, I would say if it were me, nice big breakfast, and then an hour or two later have a session of this, and have that sort of help with the digestive aspect of the food, as well as just an energizing complement to a meal. Yeah. And yourself, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty good assessment. I think a tea like this, it doesn't need to be super, I wouldn't drink this only in the winter. I think I could drink this throughout the year, just because it kind of is in that middle state. It's not, super aged, as some teas are, where they'd be much more seasonally appropriate for winter or autumn. So I think this tea could definitely... I could drink this probably on an empty stomach. I think it's definitely fermented or at a point where it'd be easy enough to drink at that point. So I wouldn't have to worry about that like I would younger raw pu'erhs or whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the way that this is transitioning from the more characteristic raw flavors to more of its original taste, which is really fruity, sweet, with a long finish. Really enjoying it.
Yeah, and the Huigan and the aftertaste is just building in my mouth right now. So we haven't talked about that in this episode, but it is significant. There's good texture as well. So this tea has a lot going on. I'd say it's a very, it's definitely on the upper end of the aged raw pu'erhs that I've had.
It's really tasty. So if someone wanted to learn more about tea, James, what should they do?
Yeah, so they should come check us out over at TeaDB.org. We're releasing a lot of different information on pu'erh and just tea in general, as well as hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. And also go check out Tea Classico. I really enjoyed this tea, and they're kind of taking that spot of having a lot of places, lot of aged raw pu'erhs, of course, which is not cheap, but if you are interested in it, I think their prices are reasonable for what you are getting.
Absolutely, yeah. Excuse me. See you guys next time for episode 73.
Yep.
And until then, enjoy your tea.
Yep. Thanks for watching, guys.